Welcome everyone, my name is Dr. Kerrie Saunders and my topic for you today will be winning at weight loss. But don't leave if that's not your thing, because I also have a lot of information that's relevant to help you prevent and help reverse chronic disease as well. So first I'd like to start with a little bit of why me, because we all have our own backgrounds and so on. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of a brief overview of that. We'll talk about the concept of integrated medicine and research frontiers in nutrition, because there is so much excitement in the field of nutritional research right now and how it relates to medicine. I'm also going to cover connections between diet and disease, and we'll focus in on obesity, of course, and heart disease. And then I'm going to end with lots of tips and tricks for you on how to do your own weight loss well. So this just gives you a little bit about my background. I started out as a clinical psychologist, and my specialty was actually addiction. I am DrFood.org if you want more information on me, but I've written a couple of books, and I also was a columnist for Veg News. And currently I'm the executive director for Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group. And this group also instituted the Plant-Based Nutrition Hall of Fame. So we've honored Dr. Michael Greger and Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn for their leadership and innovation in nutritional medicine, and there's more to come. So the concept of integrated medicine, what this means is all of the modalities for healing would be on the table in this virtual concept. So you could have traditional medicine, surgery, prescriptions. You could do diagnostics like we do here in the United States. But we would also have maybe an Ayurvedic specialist or an Oriental medicine specialist at the table, massage therapy, lifestyle factors, chelation therapy, and so on. So the patient walks into the room and can choose from a menu of services to deal with their condition. So my favorite part of the puzzle piece, so to speak, that I work in is a functional medicine perspective of lifestyle factors. So we're looking at things like biochemical individuality. We want to be patient-centered, not disease-centered. We also look a lot at balancing the whole person. We all know that stress is an issue, but actually there are physiological connections when we experience stress and how that affects our function. We also look at cellular toxicity and cellular stressors, look at true hydration, which I'll talk about later in the presentation. It's a lot more than just drinking water. So my little piece of this large puzzle is working with patients who might have weight loss issues, obviously, like we're going to cover today, or they might be battling a chronic disease or want to prevent a chronic disease that's prevalent in their family tree. So common diseases like that here in the United States, a lot of people say I have cancer all over my family, or I have obesity, or I have diabetes, or I have arthritis. And sometimes I'm working also with couples where one is diabetic and one has a heart condition, and they're trying to find recipes so both of them can eat together. And then finally, one of my favorite places to work are the real difficult cases where I'm working with physicians. While they kind of wean the patient off of medications, I'm weaning the patient onto healthy foods. So in the integrated medical model, I'm working with the rest of your medical team. We don't work against each other. Here are some examples for you of what optimal nutrition can do with all different types of diseases and situations. So for example, let's say we have constant ear infections in the child. Well, in mainstream medicine, kind of the goal here would be to put in tubes in the ears to allow some drainage, or issue antibiotics so that we could get rid of some of the disease process that's related to the excess mucus in the sinus cavity. But in this functional medicine perspective, or in preventive medicine, we actually ask the question, why is all of the excess mucus there? So in that question, most often it's an undiagnosed dairy allergy or a dairy sensitivity, which actually is quite common in the United States in humans. And I'll give you a quick example. Let's say you go to your ice cream place if you eat dairy, and you have your favorite flavor. Right as soon as you're done with that ice cream, the common request is, can I please have a glass of water? It's because this mucus and phlegm buildup has already started in the back of the throat. And it's a common occurrence. It's almost like mainstream. We go to the ice cream place and we go over to the drinking fountain. So this is just an example of how we're using optimal nutrition to help prevent and reverse disease, to help the body function more healthfully. And essentially it comes down to, I'm either adding a food in for you or I'm taking a food out for you. And then we just work together until we get to your goals. So before I start, I absolutely want to be sure that you do have a competent physician. If you don't have one, go find one. It's not a good time to go when you're in the emergency room and start interviewing around. It's much better to have a physician who understands you, understands your goals, know as much as you can about your family history. If you look at your family tree and you see clues about disease patterns, maybe several smokers, several, alcoholics, or people who use street drugs and are addicted, or if you're looking and you see arthritis, make sure that you design a lifestyle to protect yourself. We all have genetic weaknesses, but we need to design a lifestyle so that we can prevent as much as possible. And finally, absolutely have a complete list of all of your herbs and supplements and prescriptions, and every practitioner that you see gets that complete list, because we're all trained to look for different interactions. So make sure that that nice complete list goes to all of your practitioners. So here are the trends in diet and disease. Essentially, if I go to study for a client, like I said, some of my favorites are the more rare conditions and diseases, but it's the same trend at all times. It's too much of the stuff on the left, not enough of the ingredients on the right. And I'm going to go over some of these very quickly for you. The standard American diet is absolutely huge in these components on the left. Saturated fat, trans fats are man-made. These are hydrogen molecules forced into liquid oils to make them stable at room temperature, basically like super glue in your arteries. They go under hydrogenated oils and partially hydrogenated oils. Personally, I just avoid any product that has that in the ingredient list. Cholesterol and animal protein come together. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Chemical additives are all over the American diet, unfortunately. And of course, these processed foods and refining, meaning taking out the fiber and so on. But if we look at this list on the right, are phytonutrients. Phyto means plant. So these nutrients are only ever found in plants. Vitamins A, C, E, and our antioxidants. These are main cancer fighters and our immune boosters, mainly found in plants. Fiber, only found in plants. So you're starting to see this, the direction of my presentation for you today. Water, found in plants. Think of things like grapes and watermelon and pears and berries. And then our essential fatty acids. I know most physicians will tell you you need your fish oil capsules to get the essential fatty acids, but there are many wonderful sources for humans, and I'm going to go over some of those with you later. My main concern, by the way, with the fish oil, the fish, and the fish capsules is all the toxins that we see in the oceans, from this human impact that we've had, dioxins, lead, mercury, PCBs, and also we've got the cholesterol load. So fish is not my favorite source for an omega-3. So what I'd like to do is let you know that what we expect and what we suggest and recommend from a preventive medical standpoint is very different. We're really trying to raise the bar for you. We want you to know that there are these mainstream numbers that many labs will call normal, maybe statistically normal, like a bell curve normal, but certainly not preventive, and they don't translate into helping you prevent or reverse a disease process. So this slide just gives you a nice example of how our numbers are different. Many physicians would say your total cholesterol should be about 200 or less, but really in the literature, in the evidence-based research literature, we see you really need to get your cholesterol to about 150 or 100 plus your age. And of course, the fractions matter as well. Little secret here, one of the best ways to raise the HDL, your high-density lipoproteins, is to actually get out there and exercise and move. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. So we've done all of these weird things with our foods. This is where people say frankenfoods. But refining, again, is removing the fiber that's naturally present. We actually bleach our foods. If you think of many sugars and flours, they're literally bleached. Homogenize. That means take all of the fat molecules, for example, present in cow's milk, and make them homogeneous, all the same size. Well, what we find is that makes the fat slip into human fat cells even more easily. So all of these are artificial. They're having nothing to do with what we're trying to promote here, which is a whole food, plant-based lifestyle. So before I get started in on obesity specifically, I just wanted you to know that this is an exciting time to be alive for nutritional research. Nutrigenomics is a newer field, maybe 5-10 years now. It's being studied much more comprehensively, but it's the science of how foods can actually turn on and turn off your genes. So you might have a genetic load in your family. For example, we spoke earlier, maybe diabetes or cancer, but we're actually finding ways to use food scientifically, like eat more beans. It's really not too difficult. Or, you know, avoid certain foods that are triggers for you, especially for inflammatory processes. These food additions and food deletions literally can keep your genes on for the good and off for the bad. So at the end of these little chromosomes, we also see what's called a telomere. Now, a telomere, if it's long, it means you're going to have a longer, healthier life, generally speaking, with relatively disease-free. But if you have shorter telomeres, it's implying in the research that we're going to have a shorter lifespan and a much higher incidence of chronic disease. So what's beautiful is these telomeres, which we couldn't even see a few decades ago, these telomeres are telling us all of the things that we knew to be true anyway, all of the things that we know to be common sense. So it's really wonderful that science is now proving that nature had it right all along. So here we go. How do you keep your telomeres long? Stay hydrated. You avoid your inflammatory foods. And everybody's got different foods that they know it just doesn't agree with them. They're allergic to it. They know it's not good for them. Or they've shown up allergic on a test. Just avoid these inflammatory foods. Of course, meat and dairy are highly inflammatory, generally speaking. Get enough sleep. 7 to 8 hours is the general recommendation. Being in the sun, being outside, having fun, long enough to convert vitamin D every day. It's kind of actually a hormone, but we call it a vitamin. But you just want to be outside enjoying the sun. Being active and eating a lot of plant foods. So that's the very short list of how to keep your telomeres long. Literally from a science standpoint, how to enhance your life and enhance the quality of your life. So again, as I'm speaking with you today, I'm looking at this from a preventive medicine standpoint, and we're trying to raise the bar. So let's look at obesity specifically. Basically, about 1 in 3 Americans right now qualifies for obesity, the definition of obesity. And we spend $30 billion or more every year on quick fixes. If you think about your favorite home shopping channel, and they're talking about a new exercise equipment and how wonderful it is, much of that presentation is showing you how to fold it up and store it away so you don't have to look at it anymore. What we're really trying to do is encourage a nice wide variety of fitness that's interesting and fun for you. I personally have to take different classes every 6 or 8 weeks because I don't want to be bored. So you could take classes in yoga, tai chi, swimming, pole dancing, I mean, whatever makes you feel fit. You absolutely want a nice variety of fitness in your day. So let's look at these trends. And unfortunately, obesity and diabetes are quite related, especially when we look at the U.S. population. We started here in 1994, and as each state gets darker, you're seeing the increase in obesity and diabetes rates in the United States. Unfortunately, you see no state is getting better and maintaining any sense of longevity with that. We're in 2004. When we've added this dark red color, especially over here on the obesity side, that's signaling 1 in 4 is actually qualifying for the definition of obesity. But really in nature, 1 in 100 would be fitting statistically the definition of obesity. So 1 in 100 is where nature would have us. But we're actually at 1 in 3 now when you look at the United States, 1/3 of all Americans. So in preventive medicine, we're actually looking also at what comes with the weight. It's not so much that we're concerned about the number on the scale. We're much more concerned about what's coming with the number on the scale. So we know that all of these disease rates are increasing. We know that we have these very slow to creep up warning signs. Like you might feel tired more than usual. You might decide, you know what, this summer, I don't think I'm going to join the bowling league. I'm just feeling like I need a break. I just don't feel like playing with my kids as much as I used to. All of these little warning signs of fatigue and a suboptimal function of the body creep up over time. So we're more concerned with what comes with this obesity and excess body fat. This body scan is absolutely brilliant, I think, to illustrate what's happening not only to the joints. I mean, if you look at the difference between the hip and the knee joints, but also that very low fiber diet and how it basically makes your intestinal transit time very sluggish. By the way, we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But look at the effect that has on the heart and on the lungs. And interestingly, for anyone who is looking to lose weight, you'll notice that the muscle structure is relatively the same. In fact, I used to teach body composition for a body composition medical device organization, and what we saw was we really do have muscle to work with. What we need to do is lose the inflammation and lose the body fat around that muscle structure. So we've got material to work with. I want to encourage everyone, no matter where you're at, let's get going on this. So knowing where to start is important. Body mass index is really nothing more than weight and height. It's a function. But if we get into bioelectrical impedance assessment or assessment for body composition, this is where we get to know much more about how you're actually made, and we can target our strategies accordingly. So this is the old-fashioned BMI chart. You essentially look at your height on the left, you follow that across and find your weight, and then go up to the top of the chart, and you'll be assigned a BMI number. Essentially, we want people to be in the 20-ish. So 19 to 24 is considered healthy. But the composition of the body makes a big difference, because what if someone is kind of calculating as overweight, but they're just actually very densely, they have a dense muscle structure on their body? Or what if someone's actually anorexic in an anorexic process and they're going down the BMI scale? These are not healthy conditions, and that's why we get into getting into bioelectrical impedance analysis. We only want to lose the fat. By only losing the excess fat, this is where we see decreased cardiovascular risk and blood sugar and insulin levels start to balance. Your blood pressure normalizes. The actual lipid panel, which is the breakdown of all of those cholesterol numbers, starts to get healthier. You increase your HDL, you decrease your LDL. All kinds of things, you know, gynecological and sleep issues, all of these things start to correct when we maintain a healthy body fat. So here's an example of a woman in the middle who loses weight. On the left side, she's losing it in a healthy way. This is what I want for you. I want you to lose your weight in a healthy way. So you'll see in the little subsection of her muscle there, she's increasing her muscle, she's decreasing her fat, and the blood flow is actually starting to get increased because you now have cleaner arteries. On the right side, you see this person lost weight, but they still have way too much body fat, not enough muscle, and you'll see that the arteries aren't cleaned as much as they are on the healthy weight loss side as well. And the healthy weight loss, that's where we get all of our benefits. And unfortunately, what we'll see here in the US is most people, if you're one included, you've literally tried 5 diets, 10 diets, or 20 diets, and you read and you try. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks as we go through to to kind of let you find what's the missing puzzle piece. There's always a missing puzzle piece. But unfortunately, we've got the yo-yo dieting, and we have anatomical changes going on to the body now. Once you do most of these bariatric surgeries, generally speaking, you can no longer eat high fiber plant foods in any significance. And we need those fibrous plant foods for vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. When you do body composition studies on long-term weight loss with bariatric surgery, it would frighten you to see the loss of muscle and bone density, sometimes a loss in neurotransmitter neurotransmitter balance, because what we want to do is nourish the body. We don't need to eat excess fat, but we want to nourish the body with the nutrients we know that it needs. So here are some examples. They're all outlined in my book if you want to read further, but these are ways I think people become obese. Up at the top there, if the brain chemistry is insensitive to leptin, you're kind of always hungry. You know, you're walking through the cabinets in the kitchen and in the refrigerator, you know you're hungry, but you just really, you don't know what you want, you just know that you want to eat. So a lot of times that is called leptin insensitivity. One of the best ways to have a satisfied appetite is to increase your beans, peas, and lentils. These beans, peas, and lentils are in the legume category, meaning things that grow in a pod. There are 18,000 legumes to choose from on planet Earth. So you and I could list, you know, chickpeas and black beans and black-eyed peas and green lentils and red lentils, but there are 18,000 to list. So increase. For men, we suggest generally 2 cups of legumes every day. It can be green peas on a salad if you'd like. For women, we say 1.5 cups every day, and for children, 1 cup every day. And variety is important. We'll talk a little bit more about beans later, but when we're talking about leptin sensitivity, they're powerhouses. Underneath that, you see a faulty excess fat storage mechanism. Now, this can be a classic example of menopause, because estrogen tells the body to store fat, and fat tells the body to store estrogen, store fat, store estrogen, and so we end up with a loop cycle. So getting into that background and trying to assess and properly balance the reproductive hormones for that individual will be the key. Underneath that, food cravings and nutrient deficiencies, they go hand in hand. For example, if you have someone who's craving fats, especially at night after work, there might be a work stress that needs to be addressed because fats sedate us. It's almost like being self-medicated. You know, I want to not think about it for a while. And just for laughs, think about the American family Thanksgiving. It's supposed to be a happy, joyous occasion, but everyone's asleep on the couch. We've got a high-fat meal, sometimes alcohol involved, and tryptophan in the turkey in the classic American Thanksgiving. So you've got this sedated bunch of people. So the idea here is make sure that you're paying attention. If you're craving fats, it might mean that you're trying to self-medicate an anxiety or a stress. If you're craving things like salt, sugar, so pop and pretzels or pizza and soda pop, the idea here is you're looking for salts and sugars together. A lot of times that is an electrolyte deficiency. So an electrolyte deficiency can be corrected with things like celery, the natural sodium, cucumbers, berries, bananas, potatoes. Think of things with magnesium, potassium, and sodium in them, just like you'd find in an IV. And go for those natural foods. Vega, the brand, actually has an excellent electrolyte formula that we suggest for athletes. So they're out there, but absolutely, if you're a salt sugar craver, start thinking electrolyte balance. Okay, moving forward. Depression. It really doesn't matter if we're talking about a genetic depression. So you were born with maybe not enough serotonin or dopamine. Maybe you just kind of really never feel as happy as the people around you. That would be more of a neurochemical genetic load for depression. Or if you're talking about a situational depression, for example, I lost my job, a parent is ill, my children aren't doing well. These situational depressions that we can point to basically have the same effect on the brain, although it might be shorter term. So when we're feeling a little depressed, we look for things that will work. Caffeine is on the list, chocolate is on the list, and so on. But these are all very high calorie foods. On top of being stimulant foods, they're also very high in calories. So in this situation, we would be looking at the depression. So you're probably starting to see the trend here. I personally see obesity as a symptom. I personally wouldn't want to call it a diagnosis if I was allowed to rewrite the ICD all by myself. I think it's a symptom. So looking at the next column here, too many calories for activity level. Simple math, if I'm eating 2,000 calories, but my lifestyle is 1,500 calories, I'm going to end up with 500 calories that my body will try to figure out how to store it. Because when we eat too many calories from fats especially, the body thinks, well, maybe I need to store more fat because there's a drought in the environment, or the person's not eating many plants, I'm not getting nourished properly, I better start storing the substandard excess fat just to get them through the winter. So we absolutely want to make sure that our activity level is matching our caloric intake. Underneath that, I wish I had $1, because we would all be going on a cruise, for every time someone said to me, I have high cholesterol, but it runs in my family. Well, here's the deal with that. We've identified about 5% of high cholesterol is quote-unquote genetic, running in the family. About 95% of high cholesterol has way more to do with lifestyle, specifically food and stress, and not exercising, because your human body is making cholesterol, by the way, 600 to 800 milligrams every day. But we really do need to move in order for the body to have optimal function. Sorry about that, Mark. I had my phone so I could hear you call. So.
Okay, well, that's unfortunate. It was best not to bring me into it. So why don't you just pick up where you left off, and I'm assuming it can be edited.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. It's on mute now. Okay, so when we're speaking about, poor family dietary habits, that's what's running in the family most of the time as well. So if the grandmother was smothering everything in butter in the kitchen, the mother starts to smother everything in butter in the kitchen because this is what she sees, this is how we cook. And then the daughter learns that, and the son learns that, and this is how we have these poor family habits being passed down through the generations. There is about a 5% load for high cholesterol, granted, but 95% of it we're now seeing in a growing body of research is lifestyle related. Underneath that, we've got our endocrine imbalance, so this would be things like hypoglycemia and diabetes. One of the early symptoms of this insulin resistance and diabetic process can be what's called visceral adipose tissue, VAT, visceral adipose tissue. And basically you can be looking normal weight everywhere on the human frame, except in the abdomen. That's kind of sticking out, almost like you're pregnant, even if you're a man, almost like you're pregnant. Well, this visceral adipose tissue, we find, actually creates its own neurotransmitters that ask you to eat more fat. It's almost like a little alien from a neurotransmitter standpoint asking to be fed more fat. So the trick here is absolutely increase your legumes. They're fabulous for blood sugar balance. Get yourself properly nourished and get away from this constant craving for excess fat that's coming from these neurotransmitters in the visceral adipose tissue in many cases. Okay, finally, here we're talking about basically the high protein diet gang. And the reason I say that is because I've been doing this for 20 years. I've actually been plant-based for 20 years myself and doing consulting with other patients and clients in different settings. What I've seen is about every 3 or 4 years, we have the high protein diet recycle under a new name. And I know you know all the names because they get lots of press. As one of my intellectual heroes, Dr. John McDougall, says, why? because people love good news about their bad habits. So these high protein diet gang, when you consume a very high fat, high cholesterol diet, I'll give you an example. Eat the hamburger, but throw away the bun. Okay, well that's good if we threw away the bun, which was the enriched, refined, wheat product that just converts to sugar in our mouth. But if we only eat the burger, we're getting no phytochemicals, no fiber, and a huge load of cholesterol and saturated fat with the protein. This is why I promote the legumes for protein and amino acids, because generally speaking, they're very low in fat, and they have the fiber, and they have the phytochemicals. So they truly do trump the meat myth. I'll call it the meat myth. A couple other things happen when you're doing the high protein diet. After about 6 months, there's research of what's called metabolic reset, meaning if your body is that starved for phytochemicals and fiber and vitamins and minerals, it actually starts to regulate to store more fat. It thinks there's a famine in the environment, perhaps, or maybe there's a drought. And all of a sudden, the body is very wise. It goes into survival mode, and it actually starts storing more fat. And then the longer-term side effect of the high-protein diets is what's called serotonin depletion. Serotonin is that neurotransmitter in the brain that says life is good. I'm going to get through my to-do list today. I'm confident. I'm feeling good. I can get through these things today. Serotonin is life is good. And over a period of time, when we're not eating enough plant foods and fiber and functioning optimally, serotonin drops, and it puts us into a state of depression. So here's just an example of some of the high-protein diets out there. I just wanted to compare that to the World Health Organization, even human breast milk, which was perfectly designed for human, survival, the American College of Preventive Medicine, the RDA, and the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, a website I highly recommend to you, PCRM.org. All of these other preventive entities are dropping about a third of what the high-protein guys asked the human kidneys to tolerate. Now, I'll give you a couple slides in a couple minutes about how we're not carnivores at all. Even true carnivorous animals do not eat meat 2 or 3 times every single day, 365 days a year. Their bodies aren't even set up for that kind of a load. But just take a look here. If optimal protein, based on the RDA, the PCRM, and the World Health Organization, is about 10 to 15% calories from protein, look up at these high protein guys. They're doubling and tripling that amount. Very hard on human kidneys. So let's talk about protein. If you know anybody with kwashiorkor in the United States, the incidence is about 0. And this is very sad, but we really only see it in severe abuse cases, for example, where, for example, a child had been neglected and left in a closet and not fed properly. You'll mainly see kwashiorkor outside of the United States in true starvation situations. So this might be, for example, in Darfur, where there's true starvation. It looks like skin on a skeleton with a very big abdomen. That's kwashiorkor. We really don't have issues of low protein to begin with here in the US. But when you look at all of the disease processes associated with excessive protein, we have osteoporosis and cardiovascular disease and diabetes and obesity and arthritis. If you're watching this video and you live in the US, every one of us could put our hand up several times for knowing someone with those conditions. Those are the conditions associated with excess protein. So we're already eating too much protein. Adding more protein is not the answer. So this is very interesting. All proteins are broken down by your body first into amino acids, and then they're rebuilt into the proteins you need as a human. So you do not need to eat muscle to make muscle. That is a complete myth. And another reason why I like these plant proteins is when I eat a plant protein, my organs and system do not have to sort out cholesterol and saturated fat and veterinary hormones and veterinary antibiotics. My body actually gets a nice clean protein that it breaks down into amino acids without all of that excess stuff that has to go through my organs. And you can do this quickly. My favorite way to do this, if you do not have a lot of time, is to use the jarred beans, peas, and lentils, or frozen peas, I'm sorry. The jarred beans and lentils, and then the frozen peas. So if you get the jar, you do not have to worry about any of the metal contaminations that many people worry about with some of the cans on the market. But if you are using cans, you can get sodium-free, you can get lined cans, and you can get organic in the can. Lentils actually will cook very quickly, about 20 minutes or so. So it's a very quick and easy dinner to just start with lentils, add some vegetables, maybe some vegetable broth, and you're good to go. But the idea here is with 18,000 to choose from, you don't ever have to be bored. And again, 2 cups for men, 1.5 cups for women, 1 cup for kids every day. This is one of these powerhouse foods in the vegan diet. And in my 20 years of consulting, this is usually the #1 mistake that I see being made. They're not eating enough legumes on a daily basis. So yes, the next question is, well, what about the gas? We don't want to blame the maggots for the garbage. And the legumes actually have very cool little chemical compounds in them that attach to toxins in the human intestine and convert them to air. So yes, you're going to have gas if you're going from the standard American diet over to a plant-based diet higher in legumes, but really only for about 3 days. So many of my clients start this transition on a Friday, so by the time they get to work on Monday, it's a non-issue. And sometimes you need to start with littler amounts. You don't, maybe your body can't tolerate 2 cups right out the gate, but certainly work up to it as quickly as you can. And rinsing them can make all the difference. If you see the little gelatinous goo there in the jars, and it's also present in the cans, a lot of the reason people experience gas is they're not rinsing their beans first. Same with the dried beans, peas, and lentils. Every once in a while, they're shipped in a very fine layer of soap, and that allows the beans, peas, and lentils to be relatively free of anything that might have hatched or a mold or whatever during the shipping and storing process. So you pour your dried legumes into a pan with water in the sink and massage them real quick. You'll notice here comes all the foam. And some of that is carbohydrate or cellulose. But the idea is make sure that you rinse them until that foam is gone and then proceed to use them in your dishes. So a little bit about nutrition language, because it's certainly all over the board. We're hearing terms like nutrient dense and vegan and whole food and plant pure and plant perfect. And the idea is when we look at humans, where would we fit on that spectrum? Which ones of those terms would fit for us? So let's start with man's best friend, carnivore, herbivore, or omnivore. If you look at the difference just in our teeth, and we could do several hours on this topic. In fact, one of my best friends, Dr. Milton Mills, we're actually writing a book together now. He actually has an entire development of comparative anatomy. But let's just look at the teeth to begin with. You can see here very clearly, humans do not have fangs, those canine teeth. We can call ours canine all we want, but really they're not. If you look at those fangs, that animal could go up to a dead animal and rip the flesh right off. Humans do not have that. We also have different pH in our saliva. We're actually much more alkaline. These carnivorous animals have to be much more acid. Also, if you looked at our just digestive tract, we're about 30 feet mouth to rear end. If we were carnivorous, we would be about 8 feet mouth to rear end. So you can see that we have this convoluted intestinal tract that's meant to work with fiber. As that muscle that we call the intestine moves the food along, it's actually contracting against the fiber, which is almost like a wet sponge, to move the food and the food products through the intestines. So the idea that we're carnivorous is just absolutely ridiculous. We do know anatomically that humans are natural herbivores with the ability to be omnivorous scientifically very, very infrequently. Like, for example, sometimes we might eat bugs in our salad, or every few months or every few years there might be a famine and we could survive on meat. But it's never been the original ideal diet for a human, and it certainly should not be the bulk of our intake. So we're getting back to man's best friend here. You can see his fangs. That's what he would look like if he was an herbivore. So you can see how ridiculous it is for us to take a population that's already eating way too much protein and ask them to eat more. So here's that spectrum I was telling you about. If you look at the standard American diet and some of the high protein guys there on the left, as you're moving toward what I call a plant-curious diet, and then through the vegetarian and into the plant-based, and then the whole food plant-based, which is really where we teach. I'm the executive director of Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group, pbnsc.org. We have fabulous recipes that fit in this red area here, which is where we're trying to teach folks to increase their food intake, make it the focus. When we get into raw foodism, you can do raw foodism correctly, depending where you live and how much effort you put in. But the two main scientific concerns are many, not all. Many raw foodists tend to be too high in sugar, eating too many fruits, and not, for example, maybe not enough sprouts. And then the monofoodists are people who are only eating one food per meal, and there isn't really a lot of scientific evidence that we need to do something like that. So we're teaching all of these areas here in red. So you'll notice many of the speakers at the summit who are plant-based, some of them will be promoting more beans or more greens or eating more raw, and most of them, if not all of them by now, are saying no oil. Oil is just a refined food. So eat the olive, not the olive oil. That's the message here. So the idea is when we're talking about a plant-based diet, and I give you some examples here shortly, it's going to be all of these areas in red that I'm really trying to promote. About 60 to 80% raw would be the goal. This, folks, is exactly what you think it is. This is from the University of Bristol in the United Kingdom, and you're actually looking at little cartoon renditions of human poop. So this is the Bristol stool chart. You can find it on the internet with all kinds of explanations as well. So there is a right answer. Now, if you're taking my class in a class setting, you don't have to yell out which type you normally are, but there is the right answer here. Your neighbors won't care. Type 4 is correct. And this would be 2 to 3 times a day on average. No pushing, straining, bleeding, hemorrhoids, polyps, all of that tells you that something's wrong in the digestive tract. And your transit time should be about 24 hours. So since we in America don't chew our food as well as we should, we don't chew to a cream before swallowing, most people who eat corn on the cob can see it in the toilet later. Well, that transit time, if you want to do your own test, should be about 24 hours or less. So if you have corn on the cob today at 5 p.m., about 5 p.m. tomorrow is when you'd want to see that. Also, Dr. Michael Greger, nutritionfacts.org, recommends beets because as he says, it'll turn everything pretty in pink. So if you look at the top of the chart where we see problems, these are the high protein, not enough fiber, not enough hydration type situations. Down at the bottom of the chart, we're seeing food intolerances, allergies, food poisoning, certain viruses and illnesses. But type 4, 2 to 3 times a day, no drama, takes the same amount of time as urine to pass out of the body, is the right answer. So how do we produce type 4s as humans? Well, we eat enough fiber, and 40 to 100 grams of fiber is the current recommendation based on all of the science. But our average fellow Americans are getting 11 grams in an average day. So without enough fiber, you can see why we didn't have the transit time and what looked like a type 4. We actually end up with food that's getting stuck in the intestinal tract. And that's why a lot of people have straining and constipation and so on, that intestines do not have the fiber to grab. Fiber, only present in plants, never present in any animal. So if you're doing party games, you've memorized millions of facts already today, because there's never fiber in an animal, bird, fish, insect, or human, and there's never cholesterol in a plant. So you've memorized, I could say, how about in a train full of strawberries? Well, how about in one piece of fish? The fish will never have fiber, and the strawberries will never have cholesterol. So whole food fiber is absolutely preferred to supplemental fiber. Quick reason, if you're doing supplements, they're usually maybe 3 or 4 grams of fiber in a dose. If the goal is 40 to 100, we really just need to eat properly. That's the goal. So here is my version of food as math. The next 2 slides I credit to Dr. William Harris from Kaiser Permanente in Hawaii. He was a prolific plant-based physician. We miss him dearly. He passed on a couple years ago now. But the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine recommendations are at the top of the chart for you to see as a goal. Then Dr. Harris's work summarizing the average of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and nuts and seeds together, the average fruit, for an example here, will be 88% carb, 7% protein, and 5% fat. And as you notice, if you add each row separately, it equals 100%, because all your calories will be falling into one of those categories. So for example, if I ate all oil or all butter, it would be 100% fat with no protein and no carb. So that's how you read this slide. One quick note about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are in that category because they're either a sugar or a fiber. So if you look here at legumes, so let's say black beans, they're 70% carbohydrate, but that's because fiber is a carbohydrate. So we don't want to make all carbs bad. Only the refined sugary carbs are the bad carbs. The other carbs, the fiber carbs, are what we need to stay healthy as humans. So let's follow these numbers up the slide. Let's say that you have a handful of nuts and seeds, which would be about the scientific recommendation, 0 to 2, depending on which diet style that you're following in the whole food plant-based community, 0 to 2 handfuls a day. But let's follow that up the slide. And what you're seeing here is you hit your target every day without having to weigh your food and convert kilocalories and assign a point system and use certain kinds of containers or a deck of cards. This is just real food. And as you follow the slide up, remembering certain things like a cup and a half for women with the legumes every day, maybe a handful of nuts, eating freely from all the vegetables and especially your leafy greens. Whole grains doesn't have to be whole wheat. Many people are having issues with wheat, but you can do things like teff, millet, quinoa, which is actually a seed, but we call it a grain, amaranth. So you can mix up your grains. But look how beautifully that works. Let's look at the standard American diet, however, compared to our goal of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. If you follow those numbers up the slide, what you're seeing is that this diet is way too high in fat, way too high in protein, and it certainly doesn't have any fiber at all. What carbohydrate it does have is lactose sugar from milk. So you can see the problem here. This slide also has all of the cholesterol, most of the saturated fat, all of the veterinary hormones, and all of the veterinary antibiotics. This slide, however, has all of the fiber and all of the phytochemicals and most of the antioxidants. So you can see why we're asking you, just from a mathematical standpoint, to switch over to a plant-based diet and away from these foods as much as you can, with the goal being 0 over time. Calories are not neutral. That is a big marketing ploy. Every calorie comes with something. It's either coming with vitamin C or sulforaphanes or acerola or omega-3s or saturated fat or sugar or cholesterol or red dye number 40. Every calorie is coming with something. So we need to keep that in mind as well. So Negative issues here, food foes. These would be those very high calorie but very low fiber and very low nutrient value foods. You know, it seems like a paradox, I realize that, but in our culture, we really are overfed, but we're undernourished. We have lots of calories on our landscape, but not all of them are nutrient dense, and this is what we're working to correct. So, food foes. Trans fats, man-made, I covered that earlier. If it says hydrogenated oil or partially hydrogenated oil, this is an issue. Saturated fat, cholesterol, we've covered that. And the refined carbs. Again, I'm going to reiterate, not all carbs are bad. Some of the carbs are actually fiber, which we need. So we need to be clear when we're speaking with coworkers about that, and friends and family. So where is cholesterol? Our human body, our human liver makes 600 to 800 milligrams of human cholesterol every day, which we need. We do not need to eat cholesterol. It's on a nutritional label because so many people in our culture have been warned by their physician to watch their cholesterol intake. It's not on the label because you have to look for it to eat it. It's on the label because you have to look for it to try to avoid it. So here's one of my favorite myths. Cow and chicken. Many physicians are sending people to me because they've had a heart attack and they say, I told Mrs. Smith to go from red meat to white meat. This is a huge problem. Same amount of cholesterol. We still have animal protein, which is a problem for cancer rates. And we've maybe saved a little bit of saturated fat, but nothing to speak of. So going from red meat to white meat will not do the trick. Look down the slide at eggs. 215 milligrams in one egg. Shrimp is actually a cholesterol power player. And all of our plants, as always, are 0 milligrams of cholesterol. So our food friends, we're getting close to wrapping up here. I'm going to show you a lot of pictures of combinations of foods that are beautiful and delicious. But basically what we're talking about is, yes, we've covered the macronutrients. We can see mathematically that it's easy to stay on target with fat, protein, and carbs when we're talking about plant foods. But the micronutrients are what comes in those calories, and the plant foods are the powerhouses of micronutrients. So if you're an athlete or you're trying to lose weight, and my advice is eat like an athlete, eat well, you need to function well as well. Just monitor your caloric intake so that you don't have any, you're not eating, like I said, 5,000 calories, but you're really only using 1,500. But absolutely select the foods that the athletes are choosing. So fiber as well. Okay, some of these micronutrients we're going to talk about because we're seeing not only in my practice, but also in the research literature, many Americans are low in a few key nutrients. And it's not just the vegetarians and vegans. For this, I'll point you to a fabulous video at nutritionfacts.org by Dr. Michael Greger. And he talks about, in one of his videos, how vegetarians are deficient in about 3 nutrients and meat eaters are deficient in, I think it's 8 or 11. But they're actually more deficient than the plant eaters. So check out that video. It's fabulous. It came out about a year ago. But looking at this omega-6-3 ratio, this is a common problem. I'm going to cover a couple common problems with you. The standard American diet has that ratio at about 15 to 20 to 1. Optimal is more like 3 to 1. So the issue here is getting rid of the omega-6s, which are things like processed foods, fried foods, a lot of the isolated corn and plant oils, getting rid of a lot of the junk, and increasing some omega-3s, which I'm going to give you sources of that in just a minute. But omega-6 and 3 basically compete for absorption. So what we're trying to do is make sure that you're decreasing those 6s while you're increasing your 3s. So here's a little excerpt of a handout that I give out to a lot of clients. Basically, we're looking at high omega-3 plant foods as your first choice, and you absolutely want variety. So there are some genetic absorption differences in the literature. We're finding, let's say 3 of us are eating only flax seeds every day. Maybe genetically, I'm not really absorbing it from the flax seeds. So we want to protect ourselves from any of these absorption differences by getting a nice variety. And by the way, you're also getting a lot of other nutrient variety when you eat different foods as well. So you want a variety. 1 to 2 omega-3 sources every day. My favorite would be 1 or 2 handfuls of purslane. It's very high in omega-3s. Unfortunately, in some states, they call it a weed. But in some cultures, it's actually considered quite medicinal. You would use this like a sprout. There's a little picture of it there on the right. You could put it in a sandwich or put it on a salad. Some cultures make teas out of it. Underneath that, you see flax seeds, which need to be ground, chia seeds, hemp seeds, pumpkin seeds, and walnuts. I noted English walnuts. Black walnuts are very healthy, but they're not containing that omega-3 load that we need. So specifically for omega-3s, it would be the English walnuts. Moderate players in the omega-3 world, you know, some of our spices, pumpkin and soy and plant milks. And then underneath that, there are plant-derived omega-3 supplements out there. According to Dr. Joel Furman's more recent literature review, we're looking more at about 500 milligrams on a daily basis of the EPA DHA. And you can see there are many vegan sources to choose from on the market now. Okay, why don't I pick fish? Again, not only for the vegan, you know, ethical issue, I don't need to kill something in order to get it, but remember as well, they're getting it from the greens in the water. So they're not manufacturing it. They're actually getting it from the greens in the water. So I'm trying to promote to you to get it from natural sources yourself. And you don't have to worry about the toxins in the water, by the way. So any one of these every day, they're dosed out on the handout if you want to go back and pause on that slide. But the idea is, I can't say this enough, it's responsible for the membrane on the cell of every single cell in the human body, and it's very important for maintaining hydration as well. You can't push nutrients into the cell without having a healthy cell membrane. So calcium, if you're concerned about, well, for weight loss, I've been eating yogurt and low-fat milk and all those typical recommendations, and Kerrie's saying get rid of dairy. Where else am I going to get my calcium? I don't want you to worry. The bottom line here is greens and beans for teeth and bones. Personally, you've probably noticed my teeth are quite huge. It's a genetic thing, but I've been allergic to cow milk my entire life. In fact, if you read my story at pbnsg.org, I almost died as an infant from my allergy. It was so severe. So I'm dairy-free, and I have no issues with osteoporosis, osteopenia, or dental issues, and I'm 53. So far, so good. Greens and beans for teeth and bones. So look at our healthiest cultures. They're already doing this. Collards and black-eyed peas, cilantro and pinto beans, bok choy and edamame, and squash and beans with the Native American tradition. Our healthiest cultures on the planet are eating beans and greens combinations or dishes all around the world and have been for centuries. So iron, that might be your other concern. Well, what if I get away from meat? Where am I going to get my iron? There are 2 basic forms of iron. There's heme iron or non-heme, or hemi and non-hemi, but heme meaning blood and non-heme meaning not blood. So right away, I'm already very glad I'm not getting grossed out because I eat bloody meat. I don't, so I'm very happy about that. You do need iron. It's required for the health of your blood cells and your energy level. There's a couple secrets here, though. Iron travels through the body with oxygen and vitamin C. So if you think about things like beets and spinach, you realize the vitamin C is already present in the plant. So nature kind of gave it to us packaged properly. The other secret is to oxygenate, you can do that through laughter, sex, and exercise. Your choice and your combinations. Vitamin D. Again, as I mentioned earlier, misnamed. It's actually a hormone that we make in the skin once we're exposed to sunlight. Vitamin D is really important for things like mood and sleep cycle balance. It's fat-soluble vitamin. It's important for helping to escort minerals into your bone structure. And again, remember Dr. T. Colin Campbell's words. Our body when it comes to nutrition, it's a symphony. It's not one nutrient isolated at a time. You can get vitamin D from mushrooms and tofu and some plant milks and supplements, but you're making it when you're actually exposed to sun. Certain concerns arise, though, if you work shifts, for example, and you sleep during the day and you work in the plant at night. Or if you have a lot of melanin, for example, African American, Haitian, Jamaican, or if you're white as a biscuit like me with my Northern European, I have to wear SPF factor if I'm in the sun for any length of time. So having a lot of melanin or wearing SPF obviously will kind of compromise how much skin conversion you're going to have of vitamin D. What we're seeing here in my home state of Michigan is very, very frequent vitamin D supplementation needs because we really don't have the sun exposure necessary to convert. And we have long winters. We do have 4 seasons, but we have longer winters. So the supplement needs you'll see in the literature, and you need to talk to your doctor because vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. It does not flush easily like things like vitamin B and C, which are water-soluble. But generally speaking, doses are like 2,000 IUs or 4,000 IUs every day, and monitor with your physician. There's a test called the 25-hydroxy serum vitamin D test. And so you can talk to your physician about that. But generally speaking, we're seeing vitamin D needs. You can also get it, as I said, in fortified plant milks. Alfalfa sprouts also have vitamin D. Who knew? And then A, B, and C. Long story short, these are your fruit and vegetable powerhouse vitamins. They are very prevalent in anything red, orange, and yellow. All of our fruits are high in A, B, and C. Wheatgrass is especially high. So getting out there and just enjoy the plant kingdom. This is where you're going to get your vitamins, your minerals, your phytochemicals, and your fiber. Okay, vitamin B12. It's an environmental issue. It used to be present on the soil bacteria, and now it's not. So we're even seeing B12 deficiencies in meat eaters. So the best test, according to Dr. Michael Greger, one of the experts in the world on B12, is what's called urine MMA. If your urine MMA is high, that means that your B12 status is low. It's an inverse relationship. Best absorbed would be the liquid B12 or the little tablet, the sublingual tablet. And general recommendations are between 2,500 and 3,500 micrograms in a week. Now, B12 plays a huge role, even though this dose looks like a half of a Tic Tac. B12 plays a huge role in memory and recall and allowing other B vitamins to be absorbed and keeping your homocysteine down, which helps you prevent a heart attack. That homocysteine is a marker for heart attack. It helps with inflammation. So B12 is a water-soluble vitamin. We pretty much suggest it for everyone. Your body can self-regulate. Again, 2,500 to 3,500 micrograms a week. It's about a $5 to $8 investment in a year, but it can have a huge impact on your overall health and your brain function. So your food friends, these are all the reasons we're asking you to eat real food. Just to reiterate, you're getting your electrolytes, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, enzymes, which are good for digestion, and antioxidants, which are immune boosting and cancer fighting components. Variety. These are the foods you're going to see pictures of in different combinations, but sprouts, fruits, wild rices, whole grains, and berries. Add those to your legumes, and you'll have beautiful, incredible food choices. So I'm going to go through just a few slides of colorful foods and combinations. This is a quinoa noodle with a red bean, onion, and spinach, like a saute with vegetable broth. On the far right, you see cannellini beans, onions, and kale. And that's a balsamic vinegar, by the way. This is a smoky tempeh wrap, so it will have different types of lettuces. You can flavor your tempeh with, like a barbecue flavor. You can make it kind of Asian. You could make it a Middle Eastern flavor. this would be one of these transition meats. This would be like a, I don't even know, I don't eat them anymore. It's a transition food. But if you said to me, Kerrie, I would go vegan tomorrow, but there's one ingredient I'm missing, that's what Earth Balance butter is for. That's what plant milks are for. And this is one of these Smart Deli or Smart whatever. They're like a plant substitute ham with tomato, and you might put sprouts and cucumbers over a sprouted bread. So transition foods are okay for the transition, but not for the long haul. This is a nice idea for salads. Taking like dates and coconut, put it in the food processor, make a little tiny ball the size of a berry, and just add it to your salad or to your fruit. This is on a bed of kiwi. This is a rice vermicelli noodle with purple cabbage and Asian spicing. This is nice just to show you the different shapes and textures to make your fruit bowls interesting and your food beautiful. Just by slicing the strawberries differently, it adds more dimension. And use your good dishes. You absolutely want to get to a point where when you sit down to a meal, it can be simple, but because of the colors and maybe the colors on how you present it, it's a beautiful, joyous experience. This is a vegetarian sushi, so it's wrapped with maybe nori, or you could use wakame, but any type of these seafoods, sea vegetables, will mimic the taste of your favorite seafood. I've never liked seafood. I really don't know what the goal is here, but I do like vegetarian sushi. The idea here is, though, you stuff it with your lettuces and your greens and maybe some of the spicier vegetables. This is a black bean burger. You can add a portobello underneath. You could add a slice of pineapple. This would be slices of avocado. And then maybe your favorite salsa on a sprouted bun. On the far right, one of my favorite dishes of all time. It's Middle Eastern mujadra. And this is a lentil dish with onions. Some recipes will call for adding rice, and some will call for adding bulgur wheat. But the staple dish is basically lentils and onions. Fabulous. The onions actually sweeten the lentils. It's just a wonderful, one of my favorites, as you can tell. I also like Mexican and Southwest. This is a brown rice with black beans, tomatoes. You could put guacamole in and some romaine lettuce and then salsa on top. But the idea is to look at the colors in nature. I mean, we are designed to salivate at colors like blackberries and raspberries and watermelon. We're not designed to salivate when we drive by roadkill, or we accidentally hit a bird while we're driving, or a deer while we're driving, which happens in Michigan, especially up north, quite a bit. We're not designed to salivate at that. We are designed to look for colorful foods, and we do salivate. So I just wanted you to know I do have some resources available for further study if you're interested. I've written a couple chapters in Rethink Food, which was put out by Shoshana Castle and Amy Lee Goodman. My own book, The Vegan Diet, actually was one of the first out, and it has 286 cited research studies and 243 pages packed with which foods help and which foods hurt. Secondly, you probably know John Pierre. We are teaming up on a DVD series, very simple recipes. This would be things like, adding 3 or 4 ingredients to a dish for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. We have snacks. Everything is whole food. One recipe uses Earth Balance, I believe, trying to show that there are transition foods available. If, like I said, if you're the person who says, I could do this in a heartbeat, but there's one food I need to replicate, at least in the short term, I can help you with that. So this is my contact information. I really appreciate your time and attention today, and please enjoy the rest of the summit.
Okay. That's a take.
Thank you.